The Galactic Council chamber was not peaceful. It was quiet in the way a battlefield is quiet after the smoke clears and before someone dares to move. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the vast amphitheater, their scaled, feathered, or armored, forms shifting uncomfortably under the cold white light. The circular chamber, designed to project authority, felt smaller than usual, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to hear what the humans would say. No one was smiling. Not after the massacre at Ravon 6. High Chancellor Vakra, a towering insectoid with crystalline wings folded neatly behind its back, scraped its claws against the polished obsidian table. "Commander Elias Rourke," it said, voice like shards of glass sliding across metal. "You stand here representing a species with a history of rash violence. Ravon 6 was a council-sanctioned territory. Your colony fell under our protection. And yet you dare accuse us of negligence?" Rourke stood alone in the center of the hall. He was not armored like the Krull warlords, nor robed in shimmering fabrics like the Velari dignitaries. His uniform was matte black, with no rank pins, no decorative medals, no signal of status. It was deliberate design to make no noise. Under the lights, he was lean, with sharp features that gave away neither fear nor anger. Only his eyes moved, scanning the assembly with the detached focus of someone who had seen this all before. The other delegates expected pleading. Humans were a young race, barely a century into interstellar expansion. The Council had taxed them, drafted them, and treated them as convenient laborers. They assumed Earth's envoy would beg for aid or compensation, perhaps cry for justice. Over the thousands of Terran lives lost on Ravon 6, but when Rourke spoke, his voice was low and steady, without a trace of desperation. "Earth doesn't beg," he said, the words slicing through the chamber's silence. "We build, and when we're done building, we never ask twice." The statement hung in the air like a loaded weapon. The Varadi ambassador, a creature of rippling green scales and gill-like ridges, leaned forward, narrowing its black eyes. "Are you threatening the Council, Commander? We hear rumors of human ships that do not exist in any registry. Fleets constructed in shadows. Surely you don't believe your kind can stand against the weight of 50 empires." Rourke's expression did not change. "I believe nothing. I only know what we've prepared." Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Delegates whispered to each other, translators struggling to keep up. There had been reports unconfirmed, dismissed as human propaganda of black HULLs moving in deep sectors of energy signatures unlike anything in the Council's archives. The High Chancellor dismissed these as myths. Yet now, staring at Rourke's unflinching face, the whispers of a hidden fleet felt less like rumors and more like warnings. "You speak with arrogance," Vakra hissed. "Humanity is not yet civilized enough to wield power responsibly. If you think this display of bravado will earn you protection, you misunderstand the Council's patience." Rourke tilted his head slightly, almost as if studying a puzzle. "We never asked for protection," he said. "We asked to be left alone." The room froze. Even the automated recording drones slowed their rotation as the tension spiked. No one had ever spoken to the High Chancellor like that. Not a single species had dared, not since the Council was formed. "What are you hiding, Commander?" the Chancellor asked, its voice rising with irritation. "These rumors of ghost fleets, these black ships. Are you foolish enough to bluff? Before this assembly?" Rourke met the alien's crystalline gaze with calm certainty. "Bluffing is for people who have something to prove. We've already proven enough on Ravon 6. A silence heavier than the first swept across the chamber. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of the predator's edge in Rourke's voice. Something had changed in the humans. They weren't pleading. They weren't apologizing. They were planning. And every empire in that room could feel it. The corridor outside the council chamber was colder than the hall itself, lined with mirrored walls and surveillance drones humming quietly. Commander Elias Rourke walked with the measured steps of a man who had no reason to rush. His words in. The chamber had landed like shrapnel silent at first, then cutting deep as the delegates realized what they had just heard. He didn't look back. He never did. News of Ravon 6 had reached every corner of known space. Official reports called it a pirate incident, but the unedited footage told another story. Burned habitats, shattered orbital stations, and human children executed on broadcast as a warning. The council had promised protection. Instead, they had filed it under unfortunate cost of border trade. For most humans, that betrayal had been the final crack in an already strained alliance. But for Rourke, it was something deeper, a confirmation of what Earth had known all along. They were never equals. They were prey waiting to be devoured. In the shadows of Dock 7, Captain Mira Kaelen stood waiting, her posture sharp and rigid, her dark hair tied back as if a single loose strand might betray her discipline. She had seen the same footage of Ravon 6 that everyone else had. But for her, the screams weren't just another news cycle. Her younger brother, Tomas, had been stationed there, one of the engineers forced to dig through wreckage while pirates laughed over council channels. His body had never been found. As Rourke approached, Mira's voice broke the silence. How long do we keep pretending diplomacy works? Rourke's eyes flicked toward her, steady and unblinking. Until they make the mistake of thinking we've given up. She gave a bitter smile. Some of them already think we have. Good, Rourke said, stepping past her into the waiting transport. That makes what comes next easier. The interior of the transport was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of hollow projectors. On the screen hovered schematics of something the council had never seen. Long, predatory silhouettes of ships with armor blacker than void, angled like blades meant to cut through space itself. These were not the ships the council had catalogued. These were Revenants. Mira glanced at the projections, her chest tightening. She had only heard rumors of Project Revenant, the secret construction yards buried deep in asteroid belts and hidden sectors. Now, seeing them in motion, she realized the rumors had been understated. These weren't warships. They were executioners. Rourke studied her reaction with a faint trace of satisfaction. We've spent decades building what they thought we were too weak to imagine. The council wanted a subordinate species. Instead, they taught us how to fight. Sir, Mira said, voice low, if we show them this, there's no going back. Rourke's reply was almost a whisper. There's nothing left to go back. 2. As the transport lifted into orbit, the stars unfolded like scattered embers, and among them, shapes began to emerge. The Dread Fleet was no longer a ghost story whispered in Terran backrooms. It was real, and it was waiting, from the dark side of Earth's outer ring, the first Revenant-class ship powered up. There were no flashing lights, no signals, just a sudden ripple in space like a shadow breathing. The ship was massive, its hull a mad abyss designed to swallow radar pings and sensor sweeps. No insignias marked it. No name adorned its surface. It did not need one. Mira's voice faltered. They'll see this as war. Rourke's gaze stayed on the silhouette of the Revenant as it drifted past the viewport, silent and implacable. They're right. Back in council space, High Chancellor Vikra watched encrypted footage with growing unease. A patrol fleet. Near the Kavara Rift had vanished 40 ships gone without a single distress signal. All sensors showed were fragments of hulls drifting like broken teeth in the void. No plasma burns, no standard weapon signatures, just precise cuts and melted cores. The council insisted it must have been pirates. But Vikra knew better. There were whispers in the intelligence channels, rumors of black ships and Terran silence. For centuries, humans had been the soft undercurrent of galactic politics, workers, engineers, diplomats. But now they moved like predators. By the time the Council ordered a formal investigation, it was too late. Revenant ships were already deployed in 3 systems, running silent, mapping enemy positions. They didn't fire first. They didn't need to. Just the sudden absence of entire fleets sent a message. Mira stood beside Rourke in the command deck of the ESS Crucible, her hands clenched into fists. "How far are we willing to go?" she asked. "As far as we need to," Rourke answered. "And when we're done, they'll remember this moment. The day they stopped underestimating us." The Crucible's comms officer turned, pale under the cold lights. "Sir, we've intercepted Council chatter. They're saying humans are bluffing." Rourke smiled for the first time all day. It was not a pleasant smile. "Good. Let's make sure they keep thinking that right up until we stop pretending." The Revenant Fleet hung in the dark like a wall of obsidian teeth, silent and cold. In the blackness beyond Saturn's rings, hundreds of Terran warships drifted without running lights, their armor drinking in the distant starlight. They did not hum with energy like Council vessels. They pulsed quietly, their power signatures so faint that even advanced sensors would mistake them for debris. It was a deliberate deception. Humans had learned long ago that the best weapon was the one they never saw coming. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the forward observation deck of the ESS Crucible, its reinforced glass offering a view of the silent fleet. Beside him stood Captain Mira Kaelen, her posture tense but her gaze unflinching. This was the first time she had seen the entire Revenant Fleet gathered in one place. "They look," she paused, unable to find the right word, "hungry." Rourke's expression did not change. "They're not hungry, Captain. They're waiting. Every weapon here has been primed for the moment the galaxy decides to test our patience again. When that happens, these ships won't wait for orders." The Crucible itself was not like the older Terran cruisers. It was a floating fortress built in secret shipyards beneath Europa's ice crust, hardened with alloys reverse-engineered from alien wreckage. On the command screens, schematics of the fleet rotated slowly, each ship a dagger in the void. The Revenant-class destroyers were sleek, needle-shaped vessels with kinetic rail cannons running the full length of their spines. The dreadnoughts were larger, carrying tungsten rods capable of achieving near-relativistic velocity, turning planets into glass if unleashed. Below, in the war bay, soldiers and operators prepped for operations that would never be spoken of on record. Among them was Colonel Drake, a man whose name never appeared in official Terran files. His face was hard-lined and scarred, one eye replaced with a cybernetic lens that shifted focus like a predator's. Drake had commanded ghost operations for a decade, and every time he returned, fewer people recognized him. That was by design. Target confirmation. Drake's voice came through the comms. Kivara Rift Patrol Fleet. 40 vessels. Council registered. Aggressive positioning near neutral zones. Rourke nodded, eyes fixed on the holomap. "This is their test. They want to see what we'll do." "And what do we do, sir?" Mira asked. Rourke didn't hesitate. "We erase the question." The Revenant strike group detached from the main formation, gliding forward like blades unsheathing. There was no engine roar, no visible thrusters, only the faint shimmer of magnetic fields bending space around them. They moved with unnatural grace, as if the void itself was carrying them toward the rift. When they arrived, the Council fleet didn't know they were there. On the bridge of the Tsar heavy cruiser Vanel, Captain Rourke was mid-transmission, issuing orders to tighten the patrol net when every console on his ship went dark. The lights didn't flicker, they simply died, as if the ship's heart had stopped. A moment later, a faint metallic thud echoed through the hull. Then another. The crew panicked, scrambling to restore power, but nothing responded. Outside, black shapes drifted past the windows, silent, featureless, unmarked. Identify. Rourke barked, but his sensors returned only static. Then the first rail slug struck. The round punched through the Vanel's bridge like paper. No energy beams, no bright plasma fire, just a solid tungsten dart moving at 20 kilometers per second. The shock wave didn't leave wreckage. It left vaporized fragments and silence. By the time the Council fleet realized what was happening, it was already over. Revenant ships moved like shadows, targeting reactors with surgical precision. In less than 6 minutes, 40 Council ships were reduced to cold drifting carcasses. There were no Terran casualties. In fact, no human was ever seen. The entire operation was run by remote AI, executing plans that had been drilled for years. Back aboard the Crucible, Mira watched the battlefield in silence. It wasn't like the battles she had studied at the academy, no drawn-out dogfights, no heroic charges. It was execution. Clean, merciless, unstoppable. "Did we just declare war?" she asked. Rourke didn't answer immediately. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the drifting remains of the Council patrol. Finally, he said, "No. We just showed them what happens when you forget who we are." Drake's voice came over the comm again. "Confirmation, Commander. No survivors. Transmission logs wiped. Council will know it was us, but they'll have no proof." "Good," Rourke said. "Let them wonder." Mira turned toward him, her jaw tight. "Wonder? Sir, this will terrify them. They'll come back harder. They'll rally the empires." Rourke's gaze shifted to her. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet certainty that chilled her more than any fury could have. "Let them. We didn't build the Revenant Fleet to be liked. We built it to make sure Earth never kneels again." In the distance, one of the dreadnought's Eclipse rotated slowly, its black hull blotting out the stars. For a moment, it looked alive, like a predator stretching before the hunt. Mira felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The Council thought humans were reckless and emotional. They were wrong. Humans weren't emotional anymore. They were deliberate. And that was far more dangerous. Rourke turned to leave the observation deck, his voice carrying like a quiet verdict. This was the first message. The next one won't be silent. The footage hit the galaxy like a lightning strike. No one knew who leaked it. Some whispered it was a rogue Terran AI. Others suspected the humans themselves, but within hours, every major Council network was playing the same clip. It wasn't footage of the Revenant Fleet striking. It was of a single soldier. One man, drenched in blood, standing atop a mound of alien corpses, screaming Earth's anthem with a voice so hoarse it sounded like tearing metal. The soldier's name was Holloway. The clip showed the final moments of the Ravon 6 massacre. The Council-approved forces had expected to break the human colony in hours. Instead, Holloway's unit fought like demons, refusing to retreat even. As plasma fire rained from above, Holloway was the last to fall. He staggered to his feet, clutching a detonator while the enemy swarmed him. He smiled through broken teeth, sang the last verse of Earth's anthem, and triggered a core overload that annihilated 4 enemy destroyers in orbit. The clip ended with his face bloody, defiant, unafraid. Across the galaxy, entire species went silent. There was something terrifying about that face, not because it was human, but because it looked like someone who had already made peace with death and decided to take everyone with him. Holloway wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. Commander Elias Rourke stood in the command center of the S Crucible, watching the footage play for the 100th time. Around him, officers moved like shadows, but their eyes kept flicking toward the screen. None of them spoke. Rourke finally turned to Captain Mira Kaelen. Do you know why this scares them more than the Revenant Fleet? He asked quietly. Mira shook her head. Because it shows what we're willing to die for? Rourke's mouth curved into the faintest trace of a smile. Because it shows what we're willing to kill for. He paused the video on Holloway's final grin. This is why we win, Kaelen. Not because we're stronger, not because we're smarter, but because when someone pushes us too far, we don't just fight back, we burn the memory of that mistake into their history forever. In a hidden data vault beneath Earth's surface, the Hollow Doctrine was formally approved. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was a campaign of psychological warfare, propaganda, and precision strikes designed to turn fear itself into a weapon. The doctrine had one rule. Every Terran life lost would be repaid tenfold, not just with blood, but with memory. No empire would forget what it meant to cross humanity. Colonel Drake was the first to execute it. He led a Black Ops strike on a Council-controlled intelligence hub orbiting Drax 4. The mission was simply erase every trace of Council propaganda and replace it with footage of Holloway. Drake's team infiltrated silently, disabling guards with tranquilizer blades, moving through the narrow corridors like phantoms. By dawn, every broadcast tower in the Drax sector was looping the footage. The Council called it terrorism. Humans called it the truth. Back on the Council homeworld, panic was setting in. High Chancellor Vikra called an emergency summit, its crystalline wings trembling as it slammed a claw on the table. This is an outrage. Humans dare to poison the minds of the galaxy with this martyr. The Valari ambassador hissed. It is not the fleet that terrifies our colonies, it is the man, Holloway. We cannot fight ghosts. Another delegate, a reptilian general with scarred scales, leaned forward. If they are ghosts, we need to remind them that flesh can still bleed. We strike their colonies. Break their morale. Morale? Vikra scoffed. Have you seen this footage? These creatures don't need morale. They need a reason, and we keep giving them one. Meanwhile, on the edge of known space, Rourke prepared the next move. The Revenant Fleet was no longer just a military force, it was a stage. A living theater of fear. He planned to show the Council what restraint looked like, not by destroying a planet, but by dismantling their war machine piece by piece. Select target, Rourke ordered. The holomap zoomed in on a Council weapons depot orbiting Calros Prime. It was heavily guarded, shielded by ion fields and drone sentries. Strike fast. Strike silent, Rourke told Colonel Drake, who stood like a statue beside him. Leave the civilians untouched. I want them to know we could destroy them. But choose not to. That will terrify them more than any slaughter. Drake's smile was razor thin. Understood, Commander. We'll make it surgical. Hours later, the Council depot was gone. Not bombed, not burned, simply dismantled in under 30 minutes. Its weapons vaporized, its command structure shredded by EMP pulses. When the dust cleared, a single message was left floating in space, projected on a massive hologram visible for miles. It was Holloway's face. No words. Just the smile. Mira stood with Rourke in the aftermath, the faint hum of the Crucible's engines vibrating under their feet. We're not just fighting them, she said, her voice low. We're rewriting the story of who they think we are. Rourke nodded. Exactly. And once they realize we're not prey, the galaxy will take a step back. He turned to her with a look that carried both gravity and inevitability. This is only the beginning. They think they've seen our strength. They haven't even seen the edge of it. The Council's ultimatum arrived on a cold burst of encrypted frequency, every word dripping with arrogance. It wasn't a message, it was a warning. 50 empires, united under the Council seal, demanded the immediate dismantling of Project Revenant. They called the fleet an act of destabilization, accusing Earth of violating interstellar accords. The final line was simple: comply or face a united response. On the command deck of the ESS Crucible, Commander Elias Rourke read the message twice, his face unreadable. Around him, the air was heavy with the hum of tense silence. Captain Mira Kaelen stood a few paces away. Her jaw clenched as she waited for his reaction. "They still think we're bluffing," she said. "They think fear is a tool only they can wield," Rourke replied, his voice low, almost amused. He closed the transmission and gestured to the tactical officer. "Begin preparations for the demonstration." "Demonstration?" Mira asked. Rourke turned to her, and in that moment, she realized there was no hesitation in his eyes, only cold certainty. "We're done speaking their language. It's time they learn ours." The Revenant Fleet moved without announcement. No grand speeches, no warning signals. At 0300 Standard Time, a single Dreadnought-class warship, Eclipse, detached from the fleet and entered neutral space near the Vornis belt. Its black hull seemed to swallow light, the absence of color making it look less like a ship and more like a shadow carved into the stars. The Eclipse didn't fire a single missile. Instead, its targeting arrays locked onto an uninhabited moon, orbiting a gas giant. A tungsten rod the size of a skyscraper was released from its launch bay, spinning silently as the ship's railgun charged. The rod accelerated, faster and faster, until it tore across the void at near relativistic velocity. There was no flash, no sound, just the sudden and horrifying sight of a moon splitting in half. Council sensors picked it up instantly. Live feeds from their own surveillance satellites showed the fractured halves of the moon drifting apart, molten scars glowing across the jagged break. The weapon hadn't just destroyed the surface, it had ripped through the core. Hours later, the Council chamber was chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices distorted through layers of translation. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others whispered of treaties, of avoiding open war. High Chancellor Vikra slammed a clawed hand against the table, the impact silencing the room. "Do you understand what this means?" Vikra hissed. "They have planet-breaking capability. A fleet of ghosts that strike without warning. If they can do this to a moon, imagine what they can do to us." From the shadows of the chamber, the Valari ambassador spoke with uncharacteristic caution. "Perhaps we negotiate." "We have underestimated their resolve." "Negotiate?" spat a drab warlord, baring his serrated teeth. "With prey that thinks it is predator? No, we break them before they grow bolder." But even as the council debated, fear was beginning to spread like fire. News of the demonstration leaked within hours. Across the galaxy, civilian networks replayed the footage of the moon cracking like glass, paired with a single message left by the humans: "Earth doesn't beg. We build, and we never ask twice." Aboard the Crucible, Mira watched the feed play across the holoscreen. Her stomach tightened. She knew this was necessary, but watching the moon disintegrate sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't just power. It was a statement that could not be ignored. "Do you think they'll call our bluff now?" she asked. Rourke turned from the viewport, his gaze sharp as steel. "What bluff?" "We've only shown them a fraction of what we can do." Colonel Drake entered the room, his uniform smudged from recent drills. "Council fleets are mobilizing," he reported, "but they're hesitant. My guess? They'll posture for a while before they test us again. We can use that time." "Use it for what?" Mira asked. Rourke's reply was a whisper, but it carried the weight of inevitability. 2. Remind them that humans don't survive by accident. We survive because we're willing to do what they never will. The Council's fleets did indeed mobilize, but the movement was slow and fractured. Some empires pulled back, unwilling to face a species that could shatter celestial bodies with a single strike. Others pushed forward, massing ships at strategic choke points, determined to intimidate the Terrans into compliance. Earth didn't respond to any of it. The Revenant Fleet remained silent, drifting like sentinels in the dark. The only message they sent was the one every empire feared. No one is safe if they provoke us. On the Outer Rim, the first whispers of rebellion stirred among alien colonies long oppressed by the Council. If humanity could stand against the empires, maybe others could too. The galaxy was shifting, and for the first time in centuries, the Council felt its grip slipping. Late that night, Mira found Rourke alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. The cold light from the viewport outlined his features, making him look almost ghostly. "Sir," she said softly, "what happens if they call us monsters?" He didn't turn to her. "Then we remind them monsters don't kneel." By morning, an encrypted message from the Council arrived. The words were clipped, formal, and laced with something they had never offered before: respect. They requested a private summit with Earth. No demands, no ultimatums. Just a meeting. They're afraid, Mira whispered, reading the message. Rourke's expression hardened. Good. Fear is the first step to peace. He leaned closer to the console, studying the incoming data. Beyond the meeting request, hidden in the Council chatter, was another signal. Fleet mobilizations near Mars. It was clear. They hadn't learned enough yet. Rourke straightened, his voice calm but cold. Prepare eclipse. If they still don't understand after this next move, they will. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this silent. Not when empires fell, not even when the Dravari Wars had left entire sectors burning. 50 species, each with their own scent of fear, sat frozen in their high-backed chairs, their collective. Eyes fixed on the man standing alone in the center of the room, Commander Elias Rourke. There were no guards with him. No aides, no banners. Just a man in black, his uniform so stark and unadorned it seemed to mock the opulence of the chamber around him. Behind him, through the vast crystalline windows, the void shimmered unnaturally. The Council delegates had tried not to look, but every time their gaze drifted, their throats tightened. Out there, just beyond the orbit of the Council homeworld, hung the Terran Revenant Fleet. They hadn't announced their arrival. They hadn't sent a single signal. One moment, the skies above the Council planet were clear. The next, hundreds of black warships had materialized like predators surfacing from dark water. Their hulls reflected nothing. No insignias, no heat signatures, not even an energy hum. They simply hung there, silent and waiting. High Chancellor Vikra tried to maintain composure. "Commander Rourke," the alien's voice rasped, crystalline. Wings twitching nervously, "your actions are unorthodox. Appearing here with a war fleet armed and ready while demanding nothing. What is your game?" Rourke's voice was calm, steady, and cold. "There's no game. I'm just here to remind you that you've miscalculated." A low hiss rippled through the chamber. A Trisarian delegate slammed his armored fist on the table. "We are 50 empires. Do you think your fledgling species can intimidate us with toys you barely understand?" Rourke's gaze shifted toward the Trisarian, and in that single moment of silence, every delegate felt the air tighten. "Intimidation? No," Rourke said softly. "This isn't intimidation. This is restraint." Outside, the Revenant Fleet moved in eerie unison. The Eclipse, the dreadnought that had split a moon in half with a single strike, hovered at the front of the formation. The Council's defense scanners tried to lock on, but their readings scrambled instantly, as if the ships were made of shadow and silence. It was not just advanced technology, it was a message. You can't even see us properly, and yet we're here. From the observation galleries, Panicked whispers spread among the alien delegates. Are they going to attack? Why are they just sitting there? Do humans even know what they're doing? Rourke raised a single hand, and the council chamber's holoscreens flickered to life. It was not a transmission from Earth, but live visuals from orbit. One by one, the Revenant-class ships decloaked in perfect formation, revealing their full silhouettes for the first time. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were weapons forged into shapes meant to terrify. Matte black spines, elongated hulls like drawn blades, and along their undercarriages, rows of kinetic rail cannons glowing faintly with magnetic charge. Every council delegate leaned forward, their expressions taut. "Do you see these ships?" Rourke said, his voice quiet but carrying through the chamber like thunder. "This is not the peak of our strength. This is what we built when you called us prey. When you taxed us, enslaved us, and told us to obey. Every hull out there is the fake result of your arrogance." High Chancellor Vikras' mandibles clicked nervously. "What do you want?" Rourke stepped closer to the center of the room, his boots echoing like gunfire on the polished floor. He pulled something from his pocket, a small, battered ID tag, Holloway's tag. He placed it on the council table, the sound of metal against stone louder than any speech. "This," Rourke said, "is all we want. To be left alone. To ensure no more of our people die begging for a mercy you never intended to give." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Valori ambassador finally whispered, "What if we refuse?" Rourke's gaze was like ice. "Then, the next thing you see will be what happens when humans stop holding back." At that precise moment, the eclipse fired not at the planet, but into the empty void above the council homeworld. A tungsten rod, 20 tons of compressed alloy, tore through space at a fraction of light speed. It missed the council planet intentionally, passing close enough to distort gravity wells and light trails. The shock wave rippled through the atmosphere, causing tremors across the capital city below. It was a warning shot, but it felt like the TZ fist of a god had just brushed past the planet's throat. The council chamber erupted in panic. Some delegates rose to their feet, shouting for retaliation. Others sank back into their chairs, eyes wide with terror. "Enough!" Vikra hissed, struggling to regain control. Rourke turned to leave, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "We won't ask twice. Next time, you won't get a warning shot. You'll just see silence." Back aboard the Crucible, Mira Kaelen watched as the Revenant Fleet held its silent vigil in orbit. "Sir," she said, "you realize we've just painted a target on ourselves for every empire in this room?" Rourke stood by the viewport, watching the stars burn cold and distant. "Good," he replied. "Let them come. The galaxy's about to learn what humanity looks like when it stops pretending to be small." She stared at him for a moment. "And what if they do come, all of them at once?" Rourke's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "Then we'll show them that numbers mean nothing when you're already dead and don't know it yet." The council issued no ultimatum that day. There were no more threats, no more condescending lectures about Terran inferiority. For the first time in centuries, the chamber dismissed without resolution. And as the alien delegates looked up at the black shadows drifting in the sky above, one unspoken truth echoed in their minds. Humanity was not the same species they had mocked. The galaxy held its breath. For 3 weeks after the Revenant Fleet's appearance over the Council homeworld, no empire dared to make the first move. Trade routes went silent, military patrols retreated into their home sectors, and entire colonies turned off long-range communications, terrified that even a whisper might draw Earth's attention. The footage of the tungsten rod slicing through the void barely missing the Council planet played across black markets and backwater taverns like an urban legend. But legends are dangerous things. The Grodot commander Elias Rourke stood on the observation deck of the ESS Crucible, watching the cold gleam of distant stars. Beyond the reinforced glass, the Revenant Fleet floated like a dark constellation of death, each ship poised as if awaiting a single, unspoken order. Captain Mira Kaelen approached quietly, carrying a datapad, her expression strained. "They've moved fleets toward Mars," she said. 3 empires, at least 20 dreadnoughts, maybe more on the way. They think we can't defend both Earth and the colonies. Rourke didn't look at her. They think wrong. "Sir," she pressed, "if we keep escalating, there won't be any going back. The Council is already calling us a rogue species. Some are asking for total war." Rourke turned, his eyes like ice. "Let them ask. We've been underestimated for too long. It's time the galaxy learns what happens when humanity fights with both hands free." The Revenant Fleet moved without a sound. In the shadow of Neptune's orbit, the dreadnought Eclipse and its sister ships aligned, their rail cannons charging with a hum so deep it resonated through the hulls of nearby vessels. Mars was not just a colony. It was the forge of Terran power, the birthplace of the kinetic railgun arrays, the tactical AIs, the tungsten rods that could crack moons like eggs. If the Council wanted to test Earth's will, they had chosen the wrong target. Colonel Drake, leading the Mars defense, prepared the surface batteries. "Project Leviathan is primed," his gravelly voice reported across the encrypted channel. "If they come any closer, we're turning their fleet into scrap." Mira stiffened. "Leviathan? That's a planetary shot. If we fire that thing, it'll make Holloway look like a warm-up." Rourke's reply was quiet, almost too calm. "Then maybe that's exactly what we need." The Council fleet arrived in orbit, banners bright, weapons charged. They thought they'd come in numbers that would overwhelm the Terran's 370 ships, 9 dreadnoughts, thousands of strike craft. The commander of the fleet, a hulking Drav warlord, opened a broad-spectrum transmission. "Terrans," his voice growled, echoing across channels. "You have broken every accord. Disarm and submit, or we burn Mars to ash." Rourke stepped forward on the Crucible's bridge, broadcasting a single, simple reply. "Fire if you dare. But understand this, when we're done with you there, won't be enough of your ashes left to scatter." The warlord hesitated. Arrogant though he was, he had seen the footage. He knew the rumors. Yet he still gave the order to fire. The first Council plasma salvo lit up the void. But before the second shot was fired, Project Leviathan answered Dot from deep within Mars' crust. A colossal rail cannon hidden for decades under the red soil awoke. It roared with a fury that made even the Eclipse's guns seem tame. A tungsten rod the length of a city tower tore through space, its velocity so great that the air around Mars' thin atmosphere ionized into flame. It struck the Council's lead dreadnought dead center. There was no explosion, no flash. The ship simply disintegrated in silence, cut in half and vaporized before its crew even knew what hit them. One by one, Leviathan fired again and again. Each shot destroyed a ship faster than the Council fleet could react. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Within minutes, the once proud fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage. No distress calls were answered. No retaliation followed. Mars held, and the galaxy watched in awe. Back in the Council chamber, panic swept like wildfire. Half the delegates demanded a ceasefire. The other half wanted to flee to their homeworlds and fortify. For the first time in centuries, the Council did not vote on policy, it simply fell apart. Mira stood beside Rourke on the bridge, staring at the tactical display of the shattered fleet. "We've just destroyed the largest armada in the quadrant," she said softly. "There's no turning back now. They'll never forgive this." "Good," Rourke replied. His tone wasn't triumphant. It was cold, measured. Forgiveness is a luxury for those who can't win. We're done asking for it. What followed was not war. It was something worse. Silence. Earth sent no broadcasts, issued no demands. The Revenant Fleet simply spread across the galaxy like a shadow. Council border stations reported sensors going dead, comms failing, and then nothing. Colonies that once belonged to alien empires found themselves liberated overnight, their overseers gone without a trace. In the back alleys of alien cities, children whispered the new phrase that had replaced human, hollow. Weeks later, Rourke stood on the bridge of the eclipse, watching the stars flicker in the distance. The Council had stopped sending fleets. They hadn't surrendered, but they didn't need to. The balance of power had shifted forever. Captain Mira Kaelen joined him, her voice low. What happens now? Do we take the fight to them? Do we claim their systems? Rourke shook his head slowly. We don't need to. The galaxy has already stepped back. From now on, they'll remember this day when humanity stopped being prey and became the apex. He paused, his gaze locked on the endless dark beyond the viewport. But we'll never forget Holloway. We'll never forget Ravon 6, every time. They look at our flag. I want them to remember why it burns with fire. In a final broadcast sent to every known sector, a single message played, spoken in Rourke's steady voice. We are not conquerors. We are not saviors. We are the ones you buried, and we climbed out of the grave sharper than you imagined. Push us, and you'll find nothing left to bury. We don't seek war, but we do not forgive. This is Earth. Remember our name. And across the galaxy, the name was remembered, not with laughter, not with mockery, but with fear.